Welcome to the Epic Company Culture Podcast, where your host, Josh Sweeney, will give you, the business leaders, HR professionals, and company culture aficionados, the knowledge you need to take your company culture to the next level.
Hello, my name's Josh Sweeney, and welcome to the Epic Company Culture Podcast. Before we get started, I would like to thank Prototype Prime for this amazing podcast space. Today, I am joined by Tim Quinn of ThingTech. Tim, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome to have you. So tell us a little bit about yourself and about ThingTech.
Okay, very good. Tim Quinn, CEO, co-founder of ThingTech. ThingTech builds is an Internet of Things platform that has built applications that process data in real time, create actions out of that data, and ultimately help improve operations within equipment rental, construction, utility, and local government industries. Folks that own and operate very expensive equipment that needs diagnostics, maintenance, and utilization data.
Right, and I spent a little bit of time in that space in my previous company that I had, which we talked about on the phone, right? So I have some heavy equipment rental experience in Groundbreak CRM, which is a platform we had built for the heavy equipment industry, and got a lot of education around what all IoT can do for equipment. So you want to share some kind of use cases for tracking major equipment for maintenance and what that does?
Absolutely. So Josh, we have our customers they own and operate, of course, very expensive equipment. They either own the equipment or they lease the equipment. And we deal with, our customers have a mix of that. What their biggest challenges really tend to focus around are things that we call the VAMP problem: visibility, accountability, measurability, and performance of that equipment. So they need data data such as discovery data, what that engine is generating, diagnostic data, utilization data, predictive data, and more importantly, prescriptive data. Taking all this data into one single platform, analyzing it, putting rules on it, putting workflows on it, and then giving that data back to the customer so that they can maintain the equipment properly, they can monitor the health of the equipment, they can extend the useful life, and they can make sure that equipment's operating safely. That's the major things that our customers want our platform to solve.
Very cool. Yeah, I loved the predictive part was one of my favorite parts when I was, working within that industry, which was the concept that was brought to me was, Caterpillar has a certain size bulldozer, and they know that a certain part wears out after so many hours of use. And they're basically like, hey, you're at 70% hours of, this part. And by the way, based on your projections and use rate, you're going to need a new part next week, or your equipment's could potentially be down. And with the rental rates or cost of this equipment, like you said, the daily use costs, they need it up full time. So I thought that was the coolest way that somebody kind of brought it home for me and said, we can predict when this thing's going to go down and fix it now.
And the big deal, Josh, predictive is one thing, but really the prescriptive, and when I say prescriptive it's one thing predicting potential failure based on the useful life or how it's been utilized, but give that data some context, such as historically you've not maintained that part properly over the past 8 years.
Right.
So you take that and you put it with some heuristics, we can really start getting very, very specific about when and how that thing's going to break in terms of out in the field. And if I'm a construction company, if I'm a utility company, if my assets are not working or not performing or not on a job site, I'm not making money. Yeah. That's how I make my money. So if we can keep those assets up and go create an uptime of 70%, from 70% to say 95%, massive ROI.
Definitely,
massive
and
ROI.
It's calculatable, so it's easy to
Absolutely.
show your value, right?
Without question.
Awesome.
Without question.
Yeah. Well, I know as a technologist and a car guy, I would love to see something for my car that helped a lot with that. I feel like, we're still in that timing mode where it's like, hey, we checked it last time and, you might need some brakes, so bring it in so we can charge you to check if you need them. And by the way, you don't need them. So there's all kinds of diagnostics in a car, but I feel like, bulldozers have better heuristics and predictive and prescriptive analytics than a very expensive automobile.
Well, you're exactly right, because those things are so expensive.
Right.
I mean, and the maintenance is just so extreme. So
yeah, so different level of need for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the intro and telling us a little bit about what you do. Love the space. As far as company culture is concerned, we'd love to hear about your company culture, but I'd like to start off with a little bit more going back in history with you a little bit and your experience in the workforce. Can you share the best company culture experience you've had? And I like to tell everybody, you don't have to name any names if you don't want to, but the best company culture experience and what about that was an amazing, an amazing experience?
That's a great question. And it's funny because this is going to sound really weird. The best experience I had, and I learned a lot, is I was actually an intern out of Georgia Tech. I went to graduate school at Georgia Tech. And I got an internship, which was required for a 4-month internship. It was in Orlando, Florida, and it was with a company called Gladding Jackson. Gladding Jackson is a civil engineering firm, planning firm. The reason that it was such an incredible experience is that Tim Jackson and Jack Gladding, the owners of this company of 200 employees, they took the time to spend time with me and took interest in me and my the other intern, to really give us really real-world life experiences. They gave us responsibility. They made us feel part of the team. They listened to us. We weren't just some intern grunt, if you will. And I learned a lot from Tim Jackson, and we're trying to pay that forward even today. We have 3 interns from Georgia Tech. We're really trying to pay that forward. So I had a really good experience there just out of the gate. In my first job. And I have had many other experiences where we had good culture but not great culture. That was a place that really had great culture. And I think we've discussed this. I've also had experiences where I've been involved with early stage companies and growth stage companies where we didn't put in a great culture, and it was a challenge. And as a lesson learned on my side that I'm still learning, but I'm learning from that with this company that I'm involved in to learn from those mistakes. Is once you establish a culture that is not proper or poor or unhealthy, it is very difficult to turn that culture around. It's almost impossible to turn it around. So starting early is a very important piece of that.
Yeah, I love those shares because we talk about it a lot on the podcast with interns or remote employees or contractors. Like really making them feel like they're a part of the team has a profound impact. And I mean, you're sitting here many years later saying that your internship had that kind of impact on you, which is super impressive.
Absolutely, and we have full-time employees. We have a few contractors. We outsource some of our work. We have other partners, but they are all part of our team. And so and we treat them as part of our team. And we all have the same mission. We all have the same corporate values that we're trying to live by, and we all trying to be successful. And how you treat people in terms of respect and values and experiences is really where it all starts, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm sure they would love to hear that was those owners would love to hear that was that memorable of an experience for you, because I mean I hear a lot of the stories in the opposite direction as well of it didn't go that way, right? We have interns, and I get people that say, well, I was surprised that I wasn't getting coffee all the time, and I'm like, what value does it have for me to bring you in as an intern to get coffee?
Absolutely.
There's no value to me for doing those mundane things. So totally get it. You mentioned that you had been part of startups where you didn't build the culture that you wanted to. I know, part of the way that I came up with Epic Culture was in my last company. I don't feel like we ever built the culture that I really wanted. And in reflecting, I realized how hard it was. Mm-hmm. So what was your experience in the startup world and building your other companies and working within other organizations? Why is it so hard?
That's a great question. And there's probably not an easy answer, but I'll give you my experience. I mean, I was involved in, this is my 3rd or 4th kind of early stage company that I've been involved in. The one that I started with a partner in the late 90s, 1999. We started the company. I was young. I didn't have the life experiences that I do now, of course, and that's just part of life, right? Yeah. And we all have to understand that, as you grow and as you mature, you learn things, and hopefully you learn things and you apply those. But in this particular company, I was focused on growth. I was didn't have the people skills that I should have had or could have had. I didn't have the patience. That was a challenge. So building the culture internally with, say, one of the first companies that I was involved in was really the biggest lesson I learned through the 13 years that I was there, Josh, was, your people are your number one asset. And how you interact with them, how you manage them, how you reward them, how you coach them, how you mentor them as a CEO is probably the single most important aspect of your job. I mean, without question. I didn't have that approach when I was younger.
Yeah.
And I let that slip away. And, and especially as you grow, as you get further and further away from the business in terms of the operational side of things, it's harder to create that culture. So what we're focused on now at ThingTech is really we're 15 employees or so, that we can build that culture properly now, and the managers and the early stage leadership that you're getting involved with you, they can now, if they're on the same page and the same values and the same approach as you are, they can help you scale that out as you move forward. And we really, as a lesson learned, I didn't do that historically in some other companies I've been involved in.
Right.
And I'm now 48, and so you can never stop learning. And now I finally learned, and I'm still learning. So
yeah. Do you feel that other people are learning the lesson, and in conjunction with that, do you feel like a lot of people say that people are their biggest asset, but don't really back it up, and that's kind of one of the big mismatches in business?
I think that's the biggest mismatch in business. Everybody says it's always about the customer, always about the person, always about your staff, but the actions don't fall behind that. It's
right.
They don't, whether it's visibility into what are you doing, having a very transparent management style, having a very, if you have goals, you have values, making sure everybody understands those. Everybody's on the same page in terms of what our mission is and how we're going to get to that next point, and really having full disclosure with your staff, at the appropriate levels, of course, not necessarily low-level financials, but being very transparent in your goals and and your day-to-day tasks and what those mean in terms of being successful is very, very important. A developer wants to know what his or her impact is to the business in terms of how positive it is. They want to be able to talk to customers. They want to get feedback from customers. So integrating them into the entire business process and giving them that transparency is a big, big deal. I think there's lots about transparency that can be learned in creating a good culture.
Yeah, definitely. I love the fact of transparency, and we're always trying to figure out how to push those limits. There's like open book and all kinds of other things that are coming along where like traditionally you're not really sure about, but as you interview people and hear about the impact it has and how they do it and how they make them teachable moments and educate people through that process, there's a lot of benefit that can definitely come from it.
Oh, I agree, and I grew up in the culture where you kind of sat in a box, and this is your box, and you just do your box.
Right.
Don't worry about the other boxes next to you are doing. Just do your box, and we're not in that world anymore. We want collaboration, we want openness, we want shared experiences, and then we want to learn from all those. So if you're in a box by yourself, you're not going to learn from the guy next to you or the person next to you very well. So we bring on a lot of younger staff to. Coming up from a technology perspective, and I think it's important to start that early on in the process versus later in life. So
yeah, definitely. Well, you mentioned, so we highlighted the best experience you had, which was the intern experience. What would you say is the worst?
The worst was in a previous job where we had challenges on the management side in terms of collaboration. Everybody being on the same page. We had infighting across departments. And that created a very toxic environment for the employees. I now recognize that. I knew it at the time, but I didn't do anything about it. Yeah. And although I might have tried, probably didn't try hard enough, but that toxicity at the management level across 4 or 5 leaders on the management team, that toxicity flows downhill very fast. People see it, staff sees it, and it creates issues internally that become a very unmanageable situation. And towards the end of my career at one other company, that happened. That happened. And if I were to look back in my life, that's the area that I wish I would have had a little more influence on a little more success.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, it was my failure. I mean, it wasn't. It was purely on my shoulders, and it was purely on my shoulders to resolve, fix, and I didn't. Either I couldn't do it, or I didn't have the ability to do it. So
yeah,
that's
gotcha.
In full transparency, that's the issue I regret the most in terms of professional issues as it relates to culture.
Yeah. I feel like I owned it in my last company, right? So I have a lot of those same feelings where it's like, man, I failed.
Yep.
I failed on company culture, and now I know why I did and how hard it was and how hard it is for other businesses. As far as the management team and when these things are happening, we interview a lot of employees when we're doing culture initiatives, and we can see it as an outsider, right? The issue is often glaringly obvious, and oftentimes it rolls up to some management, some aspect of management, somebody in that organization that has a blind spot or a belief system or something that's contributing to the challenge. What do you think, what's the best tactic to get them to realize that? Like the best tactic to get them to realize either things have changed and it doesn't work that way anymore, or, how do you help them come to see the light?
Well, I tell you, that's a great question. And I wish I knew the answer to that better than I'm going to explain it now, Josh. Because I struggle with that.
Okay.
I mean, in terms of my areas where I'm strong at and I'm weak at, but I think one of the things, a very good friend of mine told me this, who does this very well, and his name's Kit Hughes. Look, listen.
Yeah.
By the way, little plug.
Who does this? Kit's a fellow EO-er.
Yes, he is. Yes, Kit Hughes. Yes,
yeah.
Does it as well as anybody.
Yeah. Okay.
And understanding kind of how people learn and how they process data and how they process criticism. Understanding that everybody's built differently. Everybody processes data. Everybody takes criticism differently. Some thrive on it. Some of them really don't take it that way. There's not one way to speak to everybody or try to coach to everybody. That's the lesson I've learned in my life. I tend to speak to the same way to the same
right.
personality, which doesn't work all the time. I'm trying to get better. But if you ask like a kid, he really understands that. And I think understanding how that person responds to criticism, responds to coaching, responds to mentoring, understanding how that person processes that data and responds to that data, and then crafting a method around to get to them so that they can take it in as a positive versus a negative is a very critical thing. And and then just consistent, being consistent in your communication, and you're consistent in your behavior and consistent in your actions, I think is also critical as well. Yeah. And it's interesting. Somebody, I don't know, somebody told me this, but one of the big things that's all like on LinkedIn or something that is interesting is that people don't work for a company; they work for a boss. Mm-hmm. And I think that's absolutely. There's a lot to be said about that. Is that if you're not happy with your relationship with the person that's supervising or coaching or mentoring you, it's going to be hard to keep that person retained at your firm. I mean, they may love the company, love what they're doing, but if they don't have a relationship with that boss, that supervisor, that's positive, it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah. It's easy to leave. It's easy
easier,
to go find somewhere else and somebody that can mentor and coach and all of those
That's
things.
Exactly right.
Yeah. Great insight. So as far as your company now, ThingTech, what's your favorite part of your company culture now? Like you've been through this, you've been through multiple iterations. You now have the chance to build, your third, fourth, fifth iteration of a company culture that you like. What's your favorite part of this one?
My favorite part of our culture right now is the collaboration and the collaboration of all staff members across all departments. I think we have a very, very good open and transparent approach to communication where everybody's comfortable raising their hand saying that doesn't work or that does work, and here's why I think it doesn't work. So the collaboration, the communication that I think we've built across all departments and kind of all staff levels and all staff and all leadership is the most exciting thing at ThingTech right now. And when you combine that with the senior leadership of our CTO, our CFO, my co-founder, Brian Corcoran, our president, we're all absolutely on the same page, aligned in terms of vision. Vision strategy, and then the tactics. And that's the most exciting thing about ThingTech right now is just purely the alignment and the collaboration, the communication infrastructure we put in place where people are comfortable speaking up, good, bad, or ugly. And we want to hear it all in a very honest and positive manner.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
give them a place to share where
absolutely.
it's a positive experience. They feel like they can open up.
We do a weekly stand-up every Friday. We bring in lunch and we do updates and share information. Sometimes it's just jokes. Sometimes it's serious. Last week we had Andre, one of our developers, had led an internal effort. Apparently they had a wish list for that they brought up, and they said we want to read out our wish list with like 20 things. We want a keg of beer, not cans of beer. Okay, I got that. I'm with you. Right. We want more snacks. Okay, I get that. Now we need a toaster oven. Got it. I love it. We need shades for our office because the sun's beating down. That makes sense. Darcy wants a little thing when the stand-up thing. I love that. Yeah. And they were comfortable enough to stand up and go, here's our wish list. I called it a hostage ransom note, but I have it in my back pocket. I'm going to Costco after this.
Right. I love it. Yeah, it's good that everybody can communicate what their needs are and have a comfortable place to do that. I think that's the real thing is like it's a comfortable place to do it.
That's
because when other things that come up that are, a little more intangible than those items, they have the place for it. So what's another way? We use Slack, we do Scrum meetings, we do level 10s using the traction system. What's another way that you found has been amazing to make sure that the level of collaboration that needs to happen is happening?
Well, that's a great question. So we have, I think one of the things that's most important internally for us from a formality perspective is having consistent stand-ups or meetings on very specific functional topics. And so when I say that, every Monday at 9 o'clock, we're going to talk from 9 to 9:50 about strategy, tactics, and priorities for the week. And that's it. Then on Tuesdays, we have a meeting to talk about, what is our customer success? What's the challenges around that? And these are very, we have agendas, we have talking items, but then we have just open sessions of what's going on, what do you need, what challenge do you have, what resources do you need, are there things that we're failing at or we need to get you more of, and just having those consistent methods of communication that happen without question, without fail, every week at a certain point in time is really, really important for us. We use Slack, we use email, we use Write for project collaboration, right. We use Salesforce, we use Pardot. We have all these systems of communication, but it's hard to check all those from a communication. I rarely, people make fun of me internally for using, I'm not the biggest Slack guy. I mean, I have hard enough time checking my email and checking my LinkedIn. And so there's things that happen on Slack that say, Tim, we put on Slack. I said, well, I didn't know that. That's why we need to say those out loud, or we need to talk about those out loud and just communicate that in a more effective fashion. So.
Yeah, I actually just got dinged from my team the other day about my Slack usage because we have a lot of people that are collaborating on Slack, but I'm the one that's probably the most in the field.
Yep.
I'm in the most meetings. It's not, a developer is at the desk and they're developing and the Slack goes off, they can answer. A marketing person, a lot of times they're at their desk or they're around, whereas I'm in the field constantly and they're like, well, we would love to see you on Slack more. I'm like, I would love to be on Slack more, but that's a challenge. But it did, I did recognize that it was said and was able to make sure that, I'm getting back to it or responding or following up maybe a little late in that case, but I'm engaging.
The same thing happened to me last week. Is like, tell Tim, we're all on Slack. Except, I said I'm on Slack, but I'm just like I'm out in the field. I'm the most external person in our office, so I'm rarely in the office. Everybody else on our team is sitting down, and it's a great tool. But there's a flip side that the people need to understand our way of learning and our way of processing data, and even our developers have actually started using their email for important messages, which I appreciate.
Yeah. I like that because, when the Slack craze came on, I'm like, I was like, well, I kind of get it, but I kind of don't. Like, why is this going gangbusters and everybody's loving it? I'm like, and I think the disconnect for me was I need email for persistence.
That's right.
Right? It's there. It's always there. I can go through it. I can check it off at the time I need to because, like today, I'm going to be in this podcast room for 8 hours. I don't have time to check Slack. So if you have an important message, it needs to be coming through email so I can get to it later. Whereas, the Slack feed, like a Facebook or LinkedIn, it's already 1,000 messages up. I'm not going to go through all of that. So
That's right.
Definitely some food for thought. So what we'll do is we'll wrap up with our last question, which is at ThingTech, what is either the biggest company culture challenge you have right now, or the company culture item that you're most looking forward to enhancing?
That's a great question. So I think our biggest culture challenge right now is bridging expectations on the sales and marketing side to the product side and aligning those two functional areas more effectively.
Right.
Being an early stage company, and although we think and we communicate, we think we talk, we think we kind of are all on the same page, getting the alignment from the sales and marketing, the market, and aligned with the product, and getting the communication and the expectation management between both functional areas right now is our biggest challenge.
Okay.
And, so what naturally happens if a salesperson sells a project and maybe there's 2 features that we have to deliver as part of that sales process, the product manager may have signed off on it, but the dev staff didn't know anything about it. They get put in a bind, and it creates it does the worst thing, I think, in my perspective, is it creates kind of this, your sales or your technology, your product development, it creates tension that we want to dissolve. We're all on the same page. We're all pushing for the same thing. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter as long as we make that customer happy. Now, our dev team is fantastic, though. They really roll with that well. But historically, in previous lives, I didn't manage that well. I'm sensitive to making sure that we manage that properly as we move forward, because it could be the area that falls off.
Yeah.
So I'm very sensitive to that. That's my sensitivity right now.
It's interesting you bring that up, because I just picked up account-based marketing for dummies, written by my friend Sangram over at Terminus. And, I had some preconceived notions about account-based marketing, mainly around how aligning sales and marketing, and conceptually I had read a little bit about it. But one of the things I've enjoyed so far, and I'm not done with the book yet, but the alignment across multiple organizations and how it starts to, align not only sales and marketing on the goal, but also sales, marketing, and delivery, production, service, whatever it might be. And I think, there's probably lots of opportunities for it to go one step further to dev, or one step further to accounting, or other ways. So I found it was a great mind shift to start to align those. How do you plan to start to align those within the organization?
Well, the first thing I'm going to do is going to buy a book called Account-Based Marketing for Dummies. It'll be the first thing I do.
Awesome.
We're going to do that. That's going to be a strategic goal on our leadership team, and we're going to get the management that's responsible for product, management that's responsible for customer success, sales, and many of those are the same person. But we want to start with them to define what that process should be, what that strategy should be, and then start building kind of work sessions and workshops over December and January and February on how, and getting the other functional staff and other involved in that. Start helping us define what that system needs to be and what that feedback loop needs to be in terms of how we resolve the market, sales, market sales, product delivery alignment methodology. And we're really going to define that and all agree on it, sign off on it, and then based on the process we develop, really agree to execute that process. And all take a personal investment in executing that process so that it's agreed upon, we like it, we understood it, now we just have to execute it. It's kind of what we're going to do over the next 3 months. So we have some ambitious goals.
Yeah, I love the plan. I look forward to hearing how it turns out.
Well, we're excited.
Yeah, thank you for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Epic Company Culture Podcast with Josh Sweeney. If you enjoyed this content, please subscribe on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. For additional content and transcripts, visit epicculture.co. If you have questions or topics you would like us to address or expand on, tweet us at epicculture1 or email at podcast@epicculture.co.